Hello, my name is Henry Emphrey. This is a Godot 3D game development tutorial for beginners. This tutorial was made to show basics and get one started in making 3D games using the Godot engine. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, I'm doing something a little different. I do all my Godot game development stuff on my USB flash drive. And the reason that I do that is because the USB flash drive is portable. And besides, a good USB flash drive only costs about $8 at Walmart. So let's continue. So now I'm just going to open up this Godot engine here. Okay, then click on New Project. And then I'm going to click Browse. And I'm going to click on this Godot folder. So that's the folder that I'm going to use to put all my assets and everything else in that I'm going to use for my game. After that, I'm going to click Open. And I'm going to name this project Godot Tutorial. That'd be good. And then click Create. And then here's the file that I just made. So I'm just going to click on that. And now the Godot game engine is open. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to go back to that folder that we started with at the very beginning of this tutorial. And I mean, you remember this was the folder where I had my game engine in and my original Godot folder. And now you see all this new stuff in this folder because we started a new project. But what I want to do is go into this Godot folder. And inside of this folder, I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to name this folder DAE because this is the folder where I'll be putting my original models. And next, I'm going to create another folder. And I'm going to name that Converted Assets. I make these folders because Godot takes our original models and converts it to a format that it understands. And that's what this second folder is for. I'll explain this a little later when we get a little bit further into this tutorial. Next, I'm going to go find an animated model to use. So I'm going to go back to a section on my flash drive or wherever you have your model at. Mine's is in the folder called Model that's on my flash drive. Yours could be on the desktop or somewhere else, but this is where I put my stuff. Here's the model file that I'm going to use. It's a DAE Collada file. And I talked about how I made my character. I would leave the link below in case you need to watch that. So I'm just going to hit the control button and click on that. This is the model, and I'm going to click on my texture. I don't need all this other stuff. This is just gibberish. And then I'm just going to copy it. And then I'm going to go back to the folder that I was, my original folder that I was doing my Godot stuff in. Here it is. Sorry, my computer can be kind of slow sometimes. Okay, so now I'm going back to my DAE folder. And I'm just going to paste all these things in there. So now that we have these things, we can go back to the engine. And now we're just going to fix our models up so they can be used later. So we click on Import, click on Scene, because everything that Godot uses, every mesh, every model, Godot calls it a scene. So just remember that. So we're gonna click on this box here, click on our Godot folder, and go into the DAE folder and click on the model that we just imported, and then click open. So now that we have our model, we're gonna go to the converted assets folder, and we're gonna choose that folder so that Godot can put in the model in the format that it understands. Click on the folder and click choose, and then we'll click import. So finally it converted the files. And a little bit of word of caution, sometimes Godot could take a long time to convert your files, but just hang in there, just wait on it. Okay, so now our models are ready, and it's ready for importing, but we're going to import that model a little later. So first thing we're going to do is set up our scene. So click on node, click create, and then I'll click on the node again, click on the plus here, and then I'm going to search for a test cube. And I'm going to click on the test cube, click create. So now we have this cube here. It's a little menu in the inspector tab, and there's some properties about this cube. I'm going to go down to the properties of scale, and I'm going to create me a floor out of this cube. So I'm just going to cube about size 10 by let's say about 0.2. So I'll make it flat, and then I'm going to make it 10 pixels wide too. So now that I did that and hit the enter button, when I back up, we have a little floor here. And next thing that we're going to do is go back to this node tab, click on the plus, and this time in the search bar we're going to click on static body, and click on that, and click on create, because this is what makes our physics. Just do this, and then we're gonna put this floor as a child of the static body. So we're just gonna drag this floor right down here, and it should be like directly under the static body here. When we start creating our collisions and physics, I'll go into why we're doing that later. So now that we have our floor selected, we're going to go down to its inspector tab, and we're going to add some materials so that we can have something that looks a little more cooler than this what we have here. So in the inspector tab, there's a section that is called material. Click on that box down there, and then click on new fixed materials. You see it now. After you clicked on that, you can see that our floor has changed to some grayish color, but we're gonna make our floor look a little more interesting than that. We're just gonna go and find some kind of JPEG picture to upload. Hey, I found one. So we're gonna use this one right here. I'm gonna use this one right here. You can use anything you want. So I'm just gonna kind of copy and paste it back into the Godot folder we started with. I'm just gonna paste this here in our original Godot folder. Okay, so now that we got that, sometimes I get a little silly in my tutorials. Okay, so now that we have our JPG file ready, click on this arrow here, and inside of this box, go down to the part where it says texture and diffuse. Just scroll down. Yeah, there you go, texture and diffuse. Click on the box here, click on load, and then go to the Godot folder and click on the image that you put that we just put on in our Godot folder. It could be grass or whatever you want it to be. So just go click on it and then click open. We have our new floor that looks good. It don't just look good, it looks good. Okay, so next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back to our static body here and then click on the plus. We're going to find a collision shape. So we just type in collision shape. We're not done with our floor yet. So, and then click create. And then, now, this, like I said, everything in this Godot, Godot engine has its own properties. Whether it's, this time we're going to deal with the collision shape, which has its own property. Like I said, the floor has its own properties. The collision shape has its own property. When we import our model, that's going to have its own properties, whatever. And so just remember that. Okay, so now in our collision shapes inspector panel, everything is going to have its own inspector panel. So now we're dealing with collision shapes inspector panel. So in our collision shapes panel, the first thing we're going to do is make this our collision shape a box. And what our collision shape does is whenever our character collides with it, it makes the character in the floor do something. Yeah, collisions are very important in games. So we're going to make our collision shape a box, and we're going to make this collision shape the same size as the floor. So a collision shape will be 10 pixels long, 0.2 pixels thick, and you can kind of see it forming right here in this box. And then we're going to make our collision shape 10 pixels wide. So our collision shape is the same size as the floor. Okay, so now that we got our collision shape and floor, the final thing we're going to do with this floor is we're going to add a world environment. So click on this node here, and then now we're going to type in world environment. Like I said, this world environment is just going to be our light. So click on world environment, click on create. So now, once again, we're dealing with the world's environments inspector tab and properties. So we're going to go down here in its inspector tab, and we're going to, next to this word environment, we'll click on this box and click on new environment. And as you see, our floor is darkened a little bit because, again, that's our light. And then after you do that, we're going to click on this arrow here. And then we're going to click on this color here, and we're going to make our color white. I'm just going to do that. So that's it. And then we're going to just enable. So now it's you see that our floor has become a light color because that's our light now. So now that we have our floor and world, now it's time to put somebody in it. I mean, what's the sense in having a world and nobody lives in it? So we're gonna so first we're gonna import our model, but before we import our model, we'll click on this plus again, and now we're gonna click on rigid body. I ain't gonna say who. I'm imitating somebody, but I ain't gonna say who it is. Sorry. Okay, so now that we have our rigid body, we're going to try to go back to our folder and import our model. And you access your model by this chain looking icon here. And make sure you don't get this plus and this chain mixed up here because they do two different things. You get to your folders using this chain. So I'm going to click on that. And now we're back to our Godot folder, the folder that we started with at the very beginning. I'm going to click on this folder here, click on converted assets. And then now, you remember when Godot took our original model and converted it to a format that it understands? Well, this is the model that it made here, and this is the format that it understands it. So we're going to click on this, and now we're going to use this model here. So we're going to click on that and then click on opened. And bam! Now we have our character inside of our scene. And we're gonna try to go ahead and add materials to this character because it's this light white color, and it's kind of hard to see our character now. So let's go ahead and try to add some materials to it. So here's our character's node right here, and so we're gonna click on this entertainment looking thing here icon and click on editable children. So now, as you know, this is an animated mesh here. So after you click on that editable children, you'll see two other properties. We have our skeleton and we have our mesh. So click on mesh 2. And then this mesh 2, as you know, will have its own properties panel as everything else does. Now inside where you see materials, click on this node box here. And then, as always, click on the new fixed materials. And then when you see this ball, double click it. Now, just like the floor, you remember we scroll down until we see texture diffuse. Just like the floor, right? And then click on null load. So we're going to try to find our texture. So we're going to go back to the Godot folder that we started with. There it is. It's inside I put mine inside of the DAE file. Okay, so we're going to click on this. This is our texture here. This can be like our clothes or something, I guess. And then we're going to click open. And whoop! So now we have our character with this clothes and stuff on. I'm going to do one more thing before we get going even further here. I'm going to go ahead and put on a collision shape on our figure here. Again, just like the floor. I mean, and I hope you're seeing the pattern. Like a lot of things when using Godot, it's kind of like repetitious. You know, like you said, everything has its own inspector tab. You start doing stuff over and over again, and well, that's how you learn game development. Once you start learning patterns. Okay, so anyway, we're gonna I'm going to click on this rigid body here, and now we're clicking on the plus. And we're going to go back to, remember, collision shape. And we'll click on that and create it. So now we're going to go down to this collision shapes inspector panel like we did before. What are we going to do next? I bet you remember. Yes, we're going to click on this and make our collision shape a box. And then, like I say, you see this little blue box here. And then what are we going to do next? We're just going to shape the box. We're going to make this a box about the same size as our character. So it can contain our character. So for when it collides with stuff. Let's see. We're going to make this box. This is going to be a little guesswork. 0.5. I'd say that's about right. And then we're going to make it, I guess, about, no, that's 2. And then we're going to make it about 1.8. And then we're going to make it about, I say about 0.5 in width. So that's about right. Maybe it's a little too tall, but we'll deal with this later. Okay, so now we got that going. So now one important thing that we should do thus far is save our progress. You know, in case this thing crashes or something. So let's try saving this, and then we're gonna try to run it to see what happens this far. So I'm gonna just go ahead and just hit this play button, and then click yes, and then we're just gonna call this Henry game, or you can name it whatever you want, but that's what I'm gonna name mine. Okay, click save, and then we're gonna click this play button again to select that game, and then select the game again, click open. So now our scene is saved, and from here on out, if we need to save our game, we can just hit the Control S button, and it will save whatever progress we made from here on out. We saved this thing using the play button, but because that was just convenient. But you could also save your game over here with this in the scenes panel, and then save scene as. Since we already saved our game, we don't need to do that right now. Okay, so the next thing that I want to work on is the animation. So now we're going to click on this animation player, and at the bottom here we have our what I say is our default animation. And let me just play this animation right quick, just so you can see what we have here. So we had our walking, and that's our punch. So that's the two animations that are connected to our character here. And our animations are all on one animation film strip. If you ever see my Fragmotion tutorial about how I made this character, you will see how I put all the animations and things that this character does on one animation frame strip. So now here in Godot, we have to separate these two frames and name the animations. So all our animation will be stored in this box here called default. So so what we want to do now is copy. We're going to copy it once for our walking, and copy it again for our punch. And then we're going to go back to default copy, and this is going to be our walking. So now we're going to name this walking. Godot still has our walking animation as this one animation frame strip. We have to cut out some of these keyframes so that we can just have keyframes only having to do with walking. Let me show you. If you look at our character, you see that even though this has to do with walking, it still has both animations on there, and we don't want both animations. So we're going to cut some of these animations out. And to do that, now that we have walking still selected, we just go into this panel here, and then just click left click and scroll all the way down, and go all the way down to the bottom. Then make sure that this box stops on 1. Don't go past 1. Try to make it all before 1, and just get it to as close to the bar as possible, and then hit delete. So now when you go up, you don't see all those keyframes that you saw down here. And so now that we have our keyframes deleted, one thing I want to do is go to this length bar here and highlight it and put a 1 there, because that 1 means, it just means that when this thing plays, it won't go past the 1. Final thing I want to do is hit the loop button. Okay, so now let's play our scene and see what happens. Watch the character. So it works smoothly. Our character's working smoothly. Good. So now we have our walking animation. Next thing we got to do is work with the punch. So we go to this tab here, click on the copy, and we're going to rename this set of keyframes punch. So now we're dealing with a whole new set of keyframes, and this one's going to be punch. And we have to do the same thing to this one. We have to cut out all these keyframes from 0 to 1 having to do with walking. So we're going to do that right now. Here we go. Here we go. Just left click like we did the last time. So you there to go that repetition again, and then just go all the way down, all the way down. And then when you get to the bottom, hit delete. And then we scroll up. You can either scroll up with the mouse wheel or this scroll panel here. I'm gonna just do it with the mouse wheel because it's faster. Oh, and while we're scrolling up, we're gonna get our box going again. Just go straight up. And then when we're up and everything's highlighted, just left click and move all the stuff over. There we go. Now, final thing what I want to do is go back to the length panel and put in 2.2 so that when this thing plays, it doesn't go past 2.2. So I did that on the length panel. And finally, I'm going to hit the loop button. Now let's see what happens. I'm going to play this. Watch our character. Okay, so that works smoothly. So now that we got both of our animations done, I'm going to go ahead and save all this again. You know, you always want to save your progress when you get some significant things done. So I just hit Control S. And one more animation that we need to make is the idle animation. And that's easy. So again, we go back to our default, hit copy, and then we're going to rename this idle. Click OK. And then we just got, like I said, we just delete these keyframes. Remember, just like last time, as always. We really don't have to delete keyframe for idle, but I just did it anyway, just for the sake of repetition. But you don't really have to do that. All we really have to do is just put this length to 0.1 or something, because idle means it's just when our character is not doing anything. So that would be our idle animation. So now we got our idle, punching, and walking. And then finally, we're going to add a camera to our scene. And you notice up to this point we haven't dealt with any code yet. I bet some of y'all like that, don't y'all? Later, but nah, don't be afraid of coding. You know, I mean, coding is, like I said, it's just repetitious. You know, I mean, once you get the hang of it, you'll really enjoy it. Okay, so now we're trying to find a camera in our node panel here. So camera, we're back at our node panel. Okay, there the camera is. Click create. And now we're going to click on the scene and then scroll back with our mouse wheel. Well, first of all, I'm going to click on it over here, and then try to find it. Where is that thing? I'll tell you what. Since I couldn't find it, I just clicked this move button here, and now you can see the arrows here having to do with the camera. So I'm just put a green arrow here. There our camera is. Wow, it's lying flat. So we're just going to move our camera back behind the character. Let's scroll back a little bit more. Now we're going to rotate this camera so it can be facing this game scene that we made here. And I'm going to do that using the camera's inspector panel. Right here we're going to see you see this rotate part. I'm going to see our camera's kind of facing backwards now, so we just got to turn it 180 degrees forward, and let's see, 180 degrees forward and 180 degrees going the other way. Okay, so now that should be what our camera looks like. And the last thing I want to do is just pull it up a little more. And now we're going to finally play our scene. Let's see what happens. I mean, I don't know if you saw that briefly, but our character went through this floor here. So let's see what happens if I pull this character up a little bit. Wow, that collision shape is very long. So now let's see what happens when we play it. Let's see if it still goes to the floor. Oh wow. Okay, so now our character is floating in the air, but that's good because that means our collision is working. So let's bring them down some. So we go back to, we click on collision shape, and let's see, click on scale, and then maybe we can scale it down to maybe 15.5. Let's see what. Scale down. Even more than that. Let's see. How about, let's do 1. Then we just use these arrows here and pull our collision shape up a little bit. I'm scrolling so you can see a little better. Just pull this collision box up. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Let's play. Great! So our character hits the floor. Now, that's good. That's not just good, that's good. Before we start our scripting, the first thing that we need to do is initiate the keyboard controls that we're going to use in our game. That is, we're going to use the arrow keys for our game. We have to set those up before we can call them in our script so that they can be used. And that's just what Godot requires us to do if we want to customize our own keyboard controls. And actually, that's kind of the way I prefer it. You know, I'd rather be able to set up, initialize and set up and have my own keyboard controls instead of having some pre-built-in keyboard controls like some other game engines have. So we're going to set up our own controls, and to do that, we click on Scene, and then go down to Project Settings. Click on Input Map. Now we have this bar here, and in this action bar, we make note of what a specific key is going to do once we press that key. For example, I'm going to say Henry moves forward. Okay, so now I did that. I'm going to click the Add button. And now you see it down here. And then you click this plus button, tap on keys, and then I'm going to specify the up arrow key. So then we do this process again. So remember, repetition. Now let's put in Henry moves backwards. Click Add, and go down. See it there? Then go down to the plus. Then click on key, because we're going to use key, not joysticks. You can do the same process for mouse, joystick, and everything, but for now we're using keys. That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to hit the down button, and then click OK. So that's initialized. Next, do it again. Henry moves right. And hit the right button, right arrow. And then finally, Henry moves left. Moves left. And button. Okay, so all of our buttons are initialized. And you see these notes here? This Henry move forward, Henry moves backward. When we write our code, we're going to call on these notes. We're not going to put in up. We're going to call on the notes that we wrote here. So in our code, we're going to write the word Henry moves forward. You'll see how we do that later. Now we have one more thing to do. We're going to have to add script to our rigid body. So we're going to click on rigid body so that we can have our animation moving when you press some arrow keys. So let's try that now. So we clicked on rigid body and scroll down to the bottom of this tab where it says script, and then click on the box and then click on new script. We're going to choose our path, and then we're just going to call this, or I'm going to call it Henry script. Okay. Save. Then click create. Now I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to type out some code so it won't take a long time, because it'll take all day if I do this by typing. So I'm just going to stop this video and then I'm going to go through and tell you what different things do. This code extends the rigid body, of course, and below are some variables. The animation player equals null, which animation and next animation. Those are just some variables that I initialized and that we're going to use later in this code. This next part has to do with the move speed. It has to do with how fast our character will move across the screen. And this function ready set fix process to true. Well, I think that's just something that Godot requires. Some of these things that I wrote in this code is just based on some things that I saw on the Godot website. So just remember that too. And function fix process delta. That's something else that I just added based on some code examples that I saw on the Godot website. And then I have my Henry walk vector. Henry walk vector 3. That's just initializing my character for moving across the XYZ axis. And direction equals get global transformation. That's another function that I just got off the Godot website and from one of the examples. So now this section has to do with what happens when we press the arrow keys. That is, when we press the right arrow key, left arrow key, forward arrow key, and backwards arrow key. Now, do you remember when we initialized our controls and do you remember when I used what I call notes to help initialize what our keys do? Well, here's when I'm using those notes, they're really called variables, but I'm calling them notes for now. But here's when I use those things when I'm trying to call on the arrow keys now. So here's to say when I press the right arrow key, and we're dealing with the X, Y, Z coordinates. Since X has to do with going right and left, put a -1 on the X coordinate. I know in other game engines and programming languages, this would be a +1, but in Godot, it's a -1. So remember that. And then to move left, I used a +1 on the X coordinate, and to move forward, I put a +1 on the Z axis, and to move backwards, I put a -1 on the Z axis. This line says if the up key, right key, down key or left key, this line means or, is pressed, then execute the walking animation. Else, or otherwise, else means otherwise, execute the idle animation if none of the keys are pressed. The animation player line gets Emphrey and his animation player, namely the animation that we worked on earlier. It just fetches that stuff. This which animation line has to do with which animation plays based on a circumstance. The Emphrey walk line attaches the movement speed to our character, and remember, move speed was the variable that we initialized above near the beginning of our code. And the set linear velocity line, I guess, works as a placeholder for our character's XYZ variables. I'm making this screen for those who want to see our code in its entirety, or in case you just want to look at it like this or and copy it all down. You can use the same code for any other game that you would like to make. Now, I want to go ahead and change this player's name to something else. Let's change it to Emphrey, because this is a game about me, of course. So let's get that out the way. So now that we have our scene, we have our player, we have our floor, we have our world environment light, we have our collisions on both the player and the floor, we have our controls set up, and we have our scripts. Let's finally go ahead and test this game out. Okay, great. So our player has landed on the floor. So far so good. Now, so if I hit the up button, player moves forward. If I hit the down button, player moves backwards. If I hit the left button, the player moves to the left. And if I hit the right button, the player moves to the right. Great! So far so good. Now, if anybody wants a 3D game where the camera just stays in one place, like we just saw in that example we just done, then you need not go any further in this tutorial, and you can just stop right here. Now, for those who would like a 3D game that has a third-person type of deal, where the camera follows the player throughout the game, the way you get that is go over to our nodes panel, click on camera, and drag the camera down to the rigid body section, because this is where the camera becomes part of the player. After that, you click on camera, go to the left, and click on this arrow, and we're gonna click on this green button and just move it up a little bit. You kind of gotta adjust it to your liking, but the main thing is we're trying to have it behind the player and make it so that we can see the player as well. So adjust it to where you want it, and then we're gonna click on play. Okay, now you can see that when I press the up key, my character moves forward and the camera falls right behind them. When I click the down key, my character moves backwards and the camera stays with the player. Same thing when I move to the left, and same thing when I move to the right. So that's how you make that kind of game. Okay, so for those who want a side-scrolling 3D game, in order to make that, the camera still remains a child of the rigid body and thus a part of the player, but the difference in this case would be we go down to rotation, click on rotation, and sometimes you have to use a little bit of judgment on this to based on where your player is in your scene. So first you can see our player is just facing this way, but when we rotate our player, we'll do, well, maybe not 90 degrees, but minus 90 degrees. So now you can see that our player's side view is facing the camera. So now let's see what happens when we play this. Okay, so now you can see that our player is facing sideways. It can still move to the right. It can move backwards to the left. It can move forward when I press the up button and down when I press the down button. So that's how you make this type of 3D game. Now if you want a total 3D side-scrolling game where the player can only move left and right and nothing else, here's one trick. Go to Scripts. Then go down to the section where it says Henry moves forward and Henry moves backwards, and just highlight those two parts and delete that. Now let's test our game. Now our player can only move right and left. When I press the up button, he won't move, and if I press the down button, he won't move. And furthermore, just don't even put any up or down controls if you just want this type of game. So now you have the basics of making 3D games in the Godot engine. So just go ahead and take this tutorial and try to expand on these things, and hopefully you can get started on making the games of your dreams. Till next time, thanks.